Yes,
Not
nailed
the best
it.
camera angle. I had to do a last minute switch over, so we'll try to
Oh,
make it work.
no worries. This is great. Thank you for
Awesome.
hopping on the call today.
Glad to be here. Glad to be
Aw-
here.
Awesome. So, Real Industry is doing this new series called Life's Not Linear, and we are interviewing a lot of industry professionals about their transition from maybe academia to college, if they maybe graduated in a recession, job changes, layoffs, and then the pandemic, and getting a
Yeah,
feel for people who have navigated tough times and how they did that, and sharing their story and best practices.
excellent.
Yes.
Happy to share. Don't know that I have any great wisdom, but I did have not the normal start out of college. So
And that's perfect. I'm sure there's wisdom out of that. So let's start there. Where did you go to college and what did you study?
So I went to Smith College,
Okay.
which is back east on the East Coast. On the West Coast, not everybody knows all those East Coast colleges.
Mm,
And I was an art history major, and I was fascinated when I took my first art history class. Like all of the museums my parents dragged me to, like,
mhm.
oh, this is what we were looking. It was like decoding something, and I loved it. And
Mm,
I'm going to jump ahead. I was so excited about art and museums, and I got an internship. I live in LA. I got
mm.
an internship at the Getty back when the Getty had no internships.
Wow.
It was a connection, the Women's Network worked it out
Mm,
for me. So I did that. And in the middle of it, it had this really huge epiphany of like, oh my gosh, if I do this the rest of my life, I will not change anybody's life. Like,
wow.
like
What an
my
epiphany.
sitting here arguing over whether this was second century or first century or fifth century, like, and like, how is that going to change the world?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, but I wouldn't have changed my major for anything. I loved it.
Mm,
I still use it.
that's
So
awesome. So I'm glad that you loved your major. And then that's not something that everybody can say.
yeah.
Um, when did that epiphany happen? Like around what age or what
So,
year of
well,
school?
it happened while I was doing this internship, and
Mm,
I was reading these articles going back and forth over a piece that the Getty owned about whether or not it was part of Alexander the Great's grave, and it
mm,
was, and it wasn't, and you fool, how could you say this? And I just went, I don't want to spend the rest of my life doing this. I need to do something to help people. And if art education had been as prevalent then as it is now, I
mm.
might have ended up there. But instead, I went. Do you want me to just go on with my story?
Go for
Great.
it, please.
So I went on and was trying to figure out what am I going to do with this. I still love art,
Mm-hmm.
and the January, right before my last semester of senior year, I went back to school, and we have a career development office, and I spent all this time there. And I was going to go abroad, and I was going to go,
Mm-hmm.
like I was going to be Tom Hanks and Big suddenly, and go have this amazing experience.
Mm-hmm.
And my parents called the night before my last semester started and said that my mom's cancer had been back. And I should
Oh,
back up. My sister had died, so I interned at the Getty, went abroad for my junior year abroad. My sister
okay.
died unexpectedly, so we had
Mm,
already gone through that. Then my mom had cancer, but they got it gone. They caught it early. It was all great. So we had a smooth year, and then a year later it was back. And so I realized I probably wasn't going to go abroad right after
yeah.
I graduated. I'd probably be going home, and I did. Mom made it to my graduation. She was awesome. I know you all don't care about that, but I do.
No, that's
Um,
great.
and then she just she went very quickly after that.
Mm,
And so I was home with an art history degree, and I'm I'm sure the Getty probably would have helped me and hired me if I wanted to go do a
mm,
PhD in art history, but I didn't. And so a friend helped me get a job at a food bank and
okay.
a social service center, a church. My dad was a priest, so I had church
Mm,
connections. And so I went and I worked and gave people vouchers for hotels for the night and worked the
mm,
food bank and, just helped people with their needs. In the meantime, did my what was then called the CBEST, so I could be a substitute teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And my old third grade teacher found out I was subbing. She was then a principal, and she had a teacher leave in the middle of the year, and she called. I'm like living at home with my dad, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's other backstory there, but and she called up the house and was like, "Hey, Rachel used to think she was in charge when she was in the third grade. Do you think she wants to be in charge
Ah,
of a third grade?" And my dad was like, "I don't know. Why
dang.
don't you talk to her?" I was like, when do I ever get to grow up, right? Like,
Yeah, that's
here.
funny.
So that started me in teaching, which is where I
Mm-hmm.
was going. I wanted to be anyway.
Oh, nice.
I always, people in my industry, we talk about industry in my vocation, we talk about, we'll get
Mm-hmm.
there, about what your gifts are. Like, what are you innately great at? And I love
Mm-hmm.
teaching. I can put me in a room with 30 kids and nothing. We'll
Mm-hmm.
figure something out. Only
Just,
now we're in the pandemic. So put me in a room
yeah.
with 15 kids appropriately spaced. We'll still learn something.
Yes.
Um, so I went into teaching, and a year or two into that, a colleague of mine goes, "God, you really remind me of my friend, and she left, and she's teaching in Madagascar, and you guys are so alike." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I've been
Wow.
wanting to go teach abroad."
Yeah.
So we connected, and I went off. There are these clearinghouses for teaching abroad, and so I did
Mm-hmm.
get to go abroad. And I interviewed with 10 schools in 9 countries. None of this was my plan.
Wow.
Let me be
Yeah.
clear. I graduated in a recession with my sister gone, my mom gone, and then the rest of the story. My dad came out, which we all know about anyway. And so then he had this new guy in his life. I was
Mm-hmm.
like, "You're crazy." I love the guy now, but that was a long other story.
Yeah.
So I had like
It's a
my
lot going
world as
on.
I knew it completely imploded, which is
Mm-hmm.
where I think graduates now are entering into this world that's completely imploded. And so I know we like to come out, we have this, we're going to do this, your whole thing of it's not linear, right? But the
Mm-hmm.
food bank actually came back later in my life, right?
Oh,
Like
really?
there were these other connections. So I interviewed to go abroad. So here I was going abroad, not the way, not as Tom Hanks is the great,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go out and sell everything to the world, you know. But here I am as a teacher, and I got hired in Kuwait, and this is before the
Mm-hmm.
internet was really big. Like there were
Yeah.
4 pictures of Kuwait on the internet.
Oh
Like,
my
and that
God.
was back in the days of like web crawler, right? And you had
Mm-hmm.
to wait a minute for the photo to
Oh
upload.
my God.
So I didn't
I
know
don't know
what I
those
was
days.
getting into. I had no idea. I knew we'd had a war over there. Um, and I went and taught 4 years in Kuwait, and they were awesome. And I had also taught 5 years in Southern California where I grew up, including in
Okay.
the school district that raised me, that my mom had worked in. My
Mm-hmm.
third grade teacher hired me first. I later worked with a first grade teacher who I had tutored in her classroom for years. So I had all these connections, and
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I got to get out of here.
Yeah.
And taught in Kuwait for 4 years. I got to travel and pay off my student loans.
Ooh, the
Awesome.
best.
Exactly. It was all
The
like,
best.
and do fun things I could never do if I was sitting in Southern
Hmm.
California. And
Yeah.
then I was realizing I might be done with teaching, and was looking around at what next. And I was like, well, maybe, this is kind of up there with I'll be a marketer. No, maybe I'll be a textbook rep in the Middle East and like in Southeast Asia. Like
Hmm.
I do really well in Middle Eastern countries. I won't be able to get into Saudi because I'm single, but okay. But like trying to figure out
Yeah.
what next. And in the middle of that, my dad called me and said, the bishop has said if there are people who are 30 and under who are thinking about going into the priesthood, that they should talk to him. Do you want to talk to him when you're home at Christmas? And I was like,
Hmm.
maybe. And then simultaneously, a friend of mine, I had always been active in my church. I was like the good kid. My
Hmm.
sister was the rebel, heavy metal. And I was the good kid. I love you. And so it's just got to move your thumb around. And so in the meantime, a friend of mine from the church tried to hire me to be their head of religious education at a
Oh,
large
okay.
day school. And I essentially had the job, and I went to a good friend and said, I don't know what to do. Because, like, this would have been my dream job 10 years ago, but it's not now. And they said,
Yeah.
well, where are you with your call to the priesthood? And I was like, shut up. Um, and I was like, yeah, well, and I like gave all the reasons why I wasn't going to do the priesthood. And they just were like, ding, 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 knocked them all down. You know, very carefully built fortress, decimated in like 5 minutes.
Oh my gosh.
So I did one more year in Kuwait, my 4th year in Kuwait, and came back, went to a seminary in Virginia, and was there all of 3 weeks before 9/11 happened.
Oh my gosh.
And we were less than 2 miles from the Pentagon. And so here I am. I was actually on the phone to my friends in Kuwait trying to figure out what was going on. What did they know over there? Like, were the bomber, like, you know, I'm doing my thing. And that's where I was when we heard the plane hit. And that, again, changed our world as we knew it and what we went into and what we thought we were going into, and having to grapple with issues of race and class and power and authority. And I had a unique perspective because I'd lived in the Middle East. And I still have, I essentially have family in Kuwait. And
Great.
I go see them regularly. So not right now because I can't fly. I just missed my granddaughter. I'm too old for her, too young, but my granddaughter's first birthday because I can't fly. But all of this is to say, like, and so, but now in the priesthood, I have this great church. I love them, but I still bring in my mentoring from my teaching days. I still do teach my art history. I mean, spirituality and art, there is a ton out there.
Yes.
And in fact, in seminary and getting my master's there, ended up doing a self-study on art in the National Gallery and writing spiritual reflections for them. And then when I went back and did my doctorate, because I can't stop getting degrees, I'm done now.
Okay, good.
I ended up using the mentoring from my teaching and talking about how I needed to better mentor new clergy. So I would say it's not only not linear, but I often find that it's concentric circles, or maybe weird Venn diagrams, and it might move out of your life, but then it's going to move back in at some point, and you don't know what you don't know, right? Like you can't engineer how that's going to happen. That's going to be organic. And, you know, even that first job at the food bank, I'm thankful for it. It was work. I needed to work. And from that allowed me to jump into the next. It allowed me to jump into the next. And so I would, you know, knowing that this is especially for people who are out there who don't have jobs or just graduating, it's put your toe in the water somewhere, right? And it may not be your dream job. It may be dull. You may not fit in. I can't say I fit in with the people at that first job. But it's all part of building your base that will get you to where you do want to go. And it may not be where you feel so driven to. That's my other thing is to be open to change. You know, yeah. So that's what I'd have to say. I may have covered all your questions. I'm a talker.
You really did. No, I was literally just going to say that. I was like, well, I don't even know if I have any. Well, I do have questions, but for the ones that I had prepped, it was just, thank you so much for sharing that. There was just so many. I was just telling my roommate yesterday, because we were listening to the live stream I did yesterday, and it was like, you know, it's really nice to hear all these, how many transitions people have, and how, like, you graduate and you think you're going to work this job, but then you work this one, and then maybe quit, and then work this one, and then all of a sudden you're over here. And it put us at ease, because we're like, oh my God, like, what do we want to do with our lives? Blah, blah, blah. And it's like, all right, you know, just like be open to it and things will show up.
Oh yeah. You know, I had this idea I was going to get, you know, this great marketing job, and I was going to fall in love with a Frenchman, and,
Yeah.
you know, I'd be married by 25 and have my kids at 27 and 29.
Mm-hmm.
I will say I'm 50, I'm still not married. And while I miss that
Okay.
not having happened in my life, I also don't know what I would have done differently, because having my mom and sister die so early gave me a sense of, I think carpe diem can be overused at times, but it gave
Mm-hmm.
me a sense of, I have a life to live. And so how can I go out and live it as best as I can, as fully as I can, and do what I want to do. And I wanted to travel, and I got to.
Yeah.
I I absolutely am thankful for that.
And people need to hear that because I think, especially a lot of people in my age bracket, I'm graduating right now too, when they're like, oh, yeah, I want to travel, but, I don't, they're like, either the first step, they're scared, they don't want to leave their significant other or their family. And I think that it's good to hear, like, you just, like, it's so worth it. Like, the
It
world is so big.
it is, and I would say, for me, I didn't plan to ever go teach abroad, but it's how I got to go back abroad again. And
Hmm.
but when I went into teaching, that wasn't exactly my plan. It was like, I need a job. This is
Hmm.
solid. There's not a lot out there. What else am I going to go do? And there were
Hmm.
plenty of, I mean, I had tons of friends who were graduating and going to go work on Wall Street, and they're all in New York and Manhattan, and they were doing it. And I was like, I don't even know what that is.
Me
Like,
neither.
I awesome guys. But like, I didn't have that
Hmm.
drive. And I always knew that I was going to be in fields or vocations where I was giving to other people. I knew I needed to
Hmm.
have human interaction and
Hmm.
care for one another. That's just fundamental to who I am. And so, again, not linear, but
Hmm.
but connecting, right? It's not
Hmm.
linear, but in the end it all starts connecting. and
Hmm.
and that's and it and to be open and not try to control it. Like, if I had one piece of advice, it would be like,
Perfect. My
be
last
open.
question.
And if that is, um in seminary, we all joked, we're like, if this doesn't work out, there's always barista. Like, there, you will get something from that. You will get something from being a barista or a delivery person or
Hmm.
a whatever it is. And and it is something you will use in whatever your next job is. And so I think we have this thing. I have my college education, so I'm not going to do any of these jobs because that's beneath
Yeah.
me. And I'm like, well, like working at a food bank. Yeah, I went to an Ivy League school, and I'm working in a food bank for minimum wage,
Hmm.
and no insurance and no benefits and no, you know.
Hmm.
Eh, but it got me where I wanted to go. Right? It
Hmm.
helped me. And I just saw that actually some of my family in Kuwait just jumped on, so that
Amazing.
cracks me up.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You actually answered my last question too, because I like to end with, what's like one piece of advice, and you nailed it. Just be open.
Yeah. Because it's not linear. And the more we try to
Hmm.
control it, I would also say that
Yeah.
the more that we're going to do this and then this and then this, in the end, you get to your end, and it's not what you wanted it to
Hmm.
be. It's not, um, because life doesn't work that way, right?
Hmm.
You can't control it all. You just can't. You can control yourself and you can make your own choices, but other than that, So,
Yeah.
anyway, I hope I answered your questions, and it's been enjoyable. And I really do. I feel for those who are graduating this year, both college and high school.
Hmm.
It's a different graduation. It's the traditions are all changed. The
Hmm.
expectation of where you're going, even the ability to like not go home to mom and dad's. Well,
Yeah.
that oh for a whole bunch got taken away. And I am not one who's like, oh, let's all use this to like improve ourselves. But this is your circumstances. So what are you going to do with them?
Yeah.
Right. And you can't argue the circumstances. Um, you know, how do you just be open to what there is and what's in front of you? Say, all right, this is what I have for now, and we'll see where we go from there. So best of luck to you and your friends. And you're
Thank
right,
you.
it's not linear. Stick with that. Make that your life motto.
Yes. Thank you. This is like what I needed to push through this finals week. Like you really inspired me today. So I really appreciate it.
Good luck with
Yeah.
finals.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. This will be posted on Instagram and our different platforms as well. And we'll have to have you on again because this was awesome.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.